Friday noon. The Orion Strategies office shimmered under the glare bouncing off giant glass panes. Everything was perfect, from the imported ebony meeting tables, the silent Italian espresso machines, to the rhythmic clicks of high heels striking marble floors. This was no place for dreamers. This was a battleground ruled by those who survived on cold words and expensive looks. And in the middle of that world, Isabella Hartley, 28 years old, stood out like a strange blur on an otherwise flawless canvas. She wore no blazer, no Louboutins, just a light gray cardigan, a worn-out tote bag slung over her shoulder, and thick black hair neatly tied with a simple fabric tie. No makeup, no posturing, no effort to please. She arrived early, worked diligently, took careful notes, made no noise. And that was exactly why they hated her. Oops. A can popped open, followed by a sharp crack. A stream of ice-cold Coca-Cola splashed straight onto her. Her shirt was soaked. Brown droplets sprayed across her laptop, and the stack of documents she had spent all morning typing. Tara McConnell stood in front of her, still holding the can, her crooked smile feigning innocence. Oops. Sorry, Tara sneered. I thought you needed a bath. As if on cue, laughter erupted around the room. Jake Holloway, always with hair slicked like he'd just stepped out of a hair gel commercial, kicked hard at the leg of Isabella's chair. It slid. She almost fell. Across the room, Brielle Tanaka, the girl who dressed exclusively in TikTok trends, lifted her phone and zoomed in on Isabella's startled face. "This is gold," Brielle cackled. "Hey, Isabella, wave goodbye to your dignity." Isabella froze. Her body shivered from the cold soda, but inside she was burning. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't look at the camera. She just stood there, as if clinging to the last remnants of her pride. "Why?" she asked herself, heart clenched tight. "I just want to work. I don't need to be liked, just respected." But even that is a privilege here, isn't it? This wasn't the first time Isabella was used to the mocking stares, the whispers behind her back, the subtle jabs. From the first day she stepped into Orion Strategies, San Francisco's elite marketing firm, she knew she didn't belong. No Dior handbag, no Uber, black drop-offs, no cocktail hour networking. She came from an ordinary university, majored in data analytics, and had a passion for working with numbers. But to Tara, Jake, and Brielle, she was an insult to the prestige culture they built on perfume and performative hashtags. Look at her bag. Has to be secondhand. It's 2025 and she still uses a fabric hair tie. Bet she rides the bus. Their whispers were sharp blades hidden behind fake smiles. Isabella bit her lip, eyes locked on her soda-splashed laptop screen. A drop of Coke fell from her hair onto the keyboard. She dabbed it with a tissue gently, as if wiping off the remnants of her dignity. Don't react. Don't let them see you break. You made it through college. You've survived people like this before. Just finish your work. Go home. But this time she knew it had gone too far. The laughter rippled like a toxic tide. Brielle was already uploading the video. Jake was waving toward the glass-walled office where Darren Mills, their team lead, stood, watching like it was a comedy show. He didn't laugh, but he didn't stop it either. And that hurt the most. No one saw. No one stood up. No one intervened. Just her alone in a room shimmering with cold corporate steel. She slowly bent down to pick up the scattered documents. Her hand trembled. Wet hair clung to her cheeks, every small movement a silent testament to fragile resilience. No one knew that a storm was coming, and when it arrived, it would shatter everything they thought was untouchable. Time didn't stop for a girl soaked in soda. The Orion Strategies office kept spinning, as if no public humiliation had just occurred in broad daylight. The keys clicked, the printers hummed, the heels clacked against marble. Everything went back to normal, except Isabella's heart. It was still pounding like a bird drowning underwater, thrashing in silence. 1 hour ago, things hadn't been this cruel, just small cutting jabs, polished but deadly. Tara McConnell, dressed in a cream Balmain blazer, had leaned close during the morning meeting. Her voice was syrupy, sweet, but her eyes were shards of broken glass. "Cute sweater. Isa, is that from high school? Or was it from a donation box?" Chuckles rippled around the table. Isabella smiled a smile as thin as paper. She didn't respond, didn't flinch, just kept taking notes. That cardigan had belonged to her mother, who passed away 3 years ago from cancer. And they don't know, and they don't want to know, because here everything is measured by price tags and trending metrics. Jake Holloway, adjusting his hair in his laptop screen, chimed in with a smirk. "Swear, I saw her at the bus stop this morning. There was a homeless chick that looked just like her, Gray cardigan, trashy bag. Swear to God. Laughter again, louder, sharper. Brielle, without even glancing up from her phone, muttered just loud enough. Excess thrift store energy. She didn't lash out, didn't storm away. But her fingers paused on the keyboard. Every insult she answered with silence. Not because she was weak, but because she knew reacting only fed their satisfaction. She learned that lesson back in high school, where contempt was the dominant hallway language. But knowing didn't make the pain less real. I didn't come here to be someone else. I just want to do good work, go home on time, live peacefully. It's borf what it pastas en par. The problem was, at Orion Strategies, peace wasn't an option for those who didn't fit the mold. Isabella loved numbers. Cold, logical spreadsheets were her sanctuary. She could spend hours analyzing a marketing campaign, diving into chaotic data to extract clarity. That world, quiet, exact, was hers. No screaming, no judgment based on shoes. So, she took the job at Orion fully aware she'd always be on the fringe. But that fringe had now turned into a blade, and she cut a little more each day. The first few weeks had been whispers, sneering glances, cryptic tweets from Brielle. Some people really don't know their place. One more. Office vibes, with a blurry photo of someone's worn leather flats. Last week, Tara had accidentally spilled coffee all over Isabella's desk. Her documents soaked the pitch she worked on for hours, destroyed. Jake had burst out laughing. Cinderella's got to start from scratch. Darren, their manager, merely raised an eyebrow and walked away. Sayed nothing, did nothing. And Isabella kept enduring. No one needs to know who I really am. They don't need to know. Ethan is my husband. I don't need pity. I'm fine. I'm strong enough. But she'd forgotten one thing. Even steel has a breaking point. And sometimes what's most dangerous isn't the shouting. It's the quiet cuts. The sugar-coated mockery. The silent complicit stares too cowardly to do what's right. Friday 2nd, 34 p.m. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the glass. Orion today wasn't a creative hub. It was a coliseum where three well-dressed beasts prepared their final strike against the target they deemed an uninvited burden. The plan had been brewing since Monday. It started with a glance, then a WhatsApp group titled Op Isa. Laced with crying, laughing emojis, attached a secretly snapped photo of Isabella's scuffed shoes beneath her desk, taken from Jake's chair. This week, we teach her a lesson Tara had typed before she starts thinking she belongs here. And now it was showtime. Tara strutted to Isabella's desk, arms full of aged irrelevant paperwork, misprinted reports, corrupted Excel sheets, client briefs from 2 quarters ago. Dearest Isabella, she sang, voice dripping syrup, but her eyes ablaze with malice. You're not busy, right? Data doesn't exactly require a lot of brain cells. Thud. The stack of papers hit her desk like a funeral bell. Isabella looked up, blinking slowly. She stared at the meaningless charts, the outdated spreadsheets. Anyone could tell this was a power play. I have my own deadline, she said quietly. I'm working on the Vertigo campaign report. Jake snorted. She just called that a deadline. Bless her sweetheart. Printing charts is a skill we learned in 9th grade computer class. Brielle was already nearby, adjusting the filter on her phone before filming. Hey, Isa, she called out loudly. I need content for today's story. Mind giving me your best, miserable office worker face? I mean, make it authentic. She panned the camera from Isabella's worn shoes up to her tired eyes. Under the desk, Isabella clenched her fists. No trembling, no tears. Just a sharp ache behind her neck, like something deep inside her had cracked. I've gotten used to being underestimated. But today, they're not even hiding it. Today they want to destroy me. Tara stepped closer, nails tapping on the desk. You know what, Isa? I used to think you were just odd. Now I think you're dangerous. Isabella tilted her head slightly. Dangerous. Yeah, because you make people uncomfortable, because you don't try to fit in. You're quiet, you're kind, and that makes me want to shatter that quiet. Jake jumped in. She's the kind of girl old executives like the nice, introverted, hard-working type. But really, she's got nothing. Probably rents a shoebox, eats instant noodles. Probably a mediocre woman in disguise as resilient, Brielle added, still glued to her phone. She uploaded a story with the caption, "Every office needs background characters." The room seemed to shrink. Air thickened. A few coworkers looked on from afar, but no one intervened. No one wanted to get involved. Isabella rose slowly. Her eyes weren't wet, but they weren't afraid either. "I don't need to be part of your world," she said softly, almost in a whisper. "I just wanted to do my job. But apparently, that's too much to ask for here." Tara sneered, drawing out each word. "Exactly. This is Orion Strategies, not a charity center." And then, like a slap to the back of her neck, Darren Mills stepped out of his glass office chewing gum, eyes casually scanning the chaos. He looked at Isabella condescendingly. "Hartley, if you don't have anything urgent to do, you can leave early. We don't need someone here just to count the minutes." He tossed a sticky note onto her desk, scrawled on it in jagged pen. "Clean up your act." Tara clapped like she'd just finished watching a stand-up set. Jake whistled. Brielle snickered. Isabella stood still. "Now, they don't know. They'll never know that they just pushed past my final line." She reached for her phone, slipped into the break room. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from a decision quietly forming. She opened her contacts, scrolled to a familiar name. "Ethan Grayson. I'm sorry, Nate. I didn't want to bother you, but today, I just don't have anything left." The break room was a world apart, quiet, gentle, the soft hum of the espresso machine, the hint of mint from the hand soap. Isabella leaned against the counter, gripping her phone. The screen lit up with his name, Ethan Grayson. Her finger hovered over call. She had never done this before. In 3 years of marriage, she'd never brought her office problems home. With Ethan, she was not just a wife, she was a partner. A quiet balance to the power games he played every day. She'd never let him see her break. But today, "I'm sorry, but I need you, not for revenge, just to stay standing." She tapped call. 1 ring, 2, then his voice low, warm, and grounding. "Ra, are you okay?" Isabella bit her lip. His voice was like a blanket thrown over her freezing heart. "Not really," she admitted. Today wasn't okay, Nate." The same people. His tone dropped taut like a bowstring pulled to its limit. "I don't know how much longer I can take this," she whispered. "I've tried. But maybe silence isn't an option anymore." There was a pause on the other end. Then Ethan said, slow and steady, "Where are you?" "Orion. At the office." A soft shuffle like he was rising from his leather chair. "Don't leave. Don't say anything. I'm coming. 10 minutes. Nate, wait." But the line had already gone dead. Isabella inhaled deeply. Her hands still shook. She placed the phone on the marble counter, her mind racing. "I didn't call him to rescue me. Sometimes just having someone who sees you is more powerful than any retaliation." No one at Orion knew she was married to Ethan. To them, Ethan was an untouchable name, the young CEO who turned Grayson Group from a regional real estate firm into a multinational empire with influence across tech property. And, yes, marketing. Orion Strategies was one of Grayson Group's subsidiaries, which meant Ethan owned the place. But Isabella had never told a soul. She still used her maiden name, Hartley, instead of Grayson. She took public transport, packed lunch from home, wore plain clothes. Not out of shame, but because she wanted to be seen for her competence, not her connections. She met Ethan in her junior year of college. Back then, he wasn't a CEO, didn't have a 52nd floor office, no Bentley or personal assistant. He was just an architecture student struggling with applied statistics. And she, the shy math major, was assigned as his tutor. From quiet study sessions and bickering over median formulas, they fell in love. Their wedding was simple, just 34 guests. No press, no posts, no hashtags. Just a ring Ethan designed himself, set with a pale blue sapphire, the color of her mother's eyes. "I once promised myself no matter who Ethan becomes, I'll always be me. But maybe, just this once, I'll make an exception." Isabella returned to her desk. Tara was already waiting, arms crossed. "Back so soon? I thought you'd run off for good." Jake leaned on the next table, mimicking sympathy. "Probably went crying in the bathroom. Classic." Brielle unlocked her phone. Darren glanced from behind, the glass lips curled into a smirk. But Isabella said nothing. She sat down, opened her laptop. Her hands were steadier now, her heartbeat still fast, but no longer frantic. She could feel it, something in the air had shifted. The stillness before a storm. 9 minutes. She glanced at the clock. 2:44 p.m. The second hand struck the 600th mark since Ethan hung up. And at that exact moment, ding! The elevator bell echoed across the office, oddly loud in the strange hush. No one noticed at first. Brielle was adjusting her camera angle. Jake was flashing his new tattoo to Tara. Darren was leafing through a folder pretending to work. Then, the elevator doors opened. A man stepped out. No one in the office knew his name, but everything about him made the room crystallize into frozen glass. He towered above the crowd, 6'2", broad-shouldered, composed. Each footstep heavy with purpose. He wore a tailored charcoal gray suit, perfectly pressed. A Patek Philippe glinting on his wrist beneath the lights. His hair was slicked back with surgical precision, but it was his eyes that stole the breath from the room. Deep cold, not angry, not wild, but carrying a quiet force that made every survival instinct in the room scream danger. Isabella saw him first. She didn't stand, she didn't call his name, but her eyes lit up like someone who'd finally spotted the exit from a long, dark tunnel. Ethan didn't glance at anyone else. Not left. Not right. He walked straight to Isabella's desk, each step a drumbeat of inevitability. "Isabella," he said, voice low and clear as a cathedral bell. "Are you ready?" She nodded gently. "Just a minute, let me pack my laptop." She began gathering her things, the worn tote, her notebook, old headphones, items once mocked, now sacred in the stillness. Tara recovered first. She stepped forward with the most professional smile her mirror practice could offer. "Hi there, I'm Tara McConnell, client director. Here. Sorry, I wasn't aware you had an appointment." Ethan didn't turn, didn't respond. Tara stopped mid-step as if she'd hit a wall of glass. Then Ethan turned. For the first time in her career, Tara McConnell felt true fear from a single look. Ethan scanned the room, slowly, as if waiting for someone, anyone to speak up. No one did. No one moved. Then he spoke. "Who here has been bullying my wife?" The office fell silent. The question split the air like a blade. Tara froze. Jake's eyes widened. Brielle dropped her phone. Darren shot up from his chair, sweat forming under his collar. Tara stammered. Your wife." She stared at Isabella, her plain outfit, her scuffed shoes, then at Ethan, the embodiment of power and grace. Jake mumbled. "That can't be," Brielle whispered. "Isabella Grayson." Ethan didn't let them linger. "Isabella Hartley, or rather Isabella Grayson, is my wife. She works here as an employee, not because of me, not for privilege. She wanted to prove herself on her own merit." He stepped forward, voice calm, but with an undertow of fury. "And you've turned this workplace into a hell." Darren stumbled out, voice trembling. "Mr. Grayson, this is clearly a misunderstanding. I didn't know." Then Ethan cut in. "Didn't know. You sat behind a glass wall watching it unfold like a stage play. And now you want me to believe you're innocent." Darren turned pale. Jake stepped back and bumped into Brielle's table. Tara opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke again. His words nailed into the room. "No one forced my wife to speak. She didn't need to cry to be treated fairly. But today I'm standing here to defend something. You've trampled not just a person, but dignity." And in that moment, for the first time, the office began to look at Isabella differently. Not with pity, not with contempt, but with respect. She hadn't changed. But now they were forced to truly see her. The air in Orion was no longer just corporate tension. It was judgment hanging in the air, ready to fall on anyone who had laughed, turned away, or kicked the pride of a woman they now knew as the wife of Ethan Grayson. No more hiding. Ethan didn't raise his voice, but the silence that followed each word was louder than any shout. He glanced at the nameplate on Tara's desk. His eyes weren't furious, just freezing. Tara McConnell, Jake Holloway, Brielle, Tanaka, Darren Mills. Each name a sentence. He paused, then delivered the verdict clear and final. "You're all officially terminated, effective immediately." Tara turned ghostly. "What you can't do." "That I'm a senior manager, I have a contract. And I own the company," Ethan replied, eyes locked on her. "I can do whatever I must to protect the kind of workplace my wife and anyone else deserves." He turned to Brielle now, frozen like a mannequin with her battery drained. "I've seen the video you posted about my wife. It's been recorded, archived workplace harassment, policy violation, public defamation, being fired is generous." Brielle's lips moved, but no sound came out. Jake collapsed into his seat, trying to laugh it off. "It was just a joke. I was going along with the group I didn't mean." Ethan leaned in, voice low enough for just them. "If you think calling my wife a homeless subway rat was meaningless, you better rewrite your resume, because this whole city will know why you got fired." Jake turned pale. Darren, once so smug, was now sweating through his shirt. "I'm sorry, Ethan, Mr. Grayson. I didn't realize she was your wife. If I had, I. Ethan stopped him with a voice like compressed steel. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. You don't need to know if someone is rich or poor to avoid being a coward. But you watched, you let it happen. So you're fired too. The elevator chimed again. Ding. Two security guards stepped in, silent. Tara backed away. Brielle clutched the desk. Jake whispered, "Please!" Darren seemed to lose his spine. No one stopped them. They were escorted out right in front of the whole office, where every once silent observer now watched with a mix of shock, fear, and relief. Isabella sat quietly. She didn't rise, didn't smile, didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She had endured, and they had exposed themselves. As the elevator doors closed on the four of them, Tara turned one last time, voice desperate. "You think you've won, Isabella? You're just a whir." The doors sealed shut, ending the era of humiliation, and in the silence came the unmistakable sound of illusions breaking. Everything crumbled because they chose the wrong person to bully. Ethan turned to Isabella, and for the first time since he stepped into that office, his voice softened. "Do you want to go back to work, or shall we leave?" Isabella looked around. The place that had been her silent battlefield now stood unnervingly still. No more snickering, no condescending eyes. But she knew her heart no longer belonged here. "I'm done," she said, her voice clear, steady, her gaze unwavering. Ethan nodded. He extended his hand, and she took it. The elevator doors slowly closed behind them. Ethan held her hand gently but firmly, as if anchoring her in place. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. As the steel doors sealed away the floor that once tore her spirit apart, Isabella turned her head one final glance. She didn't look at Tara or Jake or Darren, the ones now being erased like inkblots from a contract. She looked at the others, the ones who had watched, who had heard, who had chosen silence. Some lowered their eyes, some turned away. A few stood motionless, their eyes shimmering with regret, as if wanting to say something. But too late. No one stood up when I needed them most, but now I don't need them anymore. As they stepped out of Orion Strategies, the late afternoon sun spilled over her dark hair, casting a faint golden halo around her. The dark cola stains on her cardigan still hadn't dried, but Isabella had changed. Not because Ethan arrived like a hero descending from the clouds, but because for the first time in her life, she was no longer bowing her head. Ethan's Bentley waited by the curb. The driver opened the door. Isabella didn't glance around. She didn't hide, didn't hesitate. She climbed in as herself. No hair fixing, no ducking. She simply sat quiet and poised, eyes forward. Ethan followed, still silent. He knew this was her moment. Inside the car was a cocoon of stillness. Then Isabella finally spoke softly, like wind through leaves, but clearly enough to cut through the layers of soundproof glass. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan turned to her eyes warm again. "I know I didn't want revenge, and I didn't get revenge. I protected you, because no one else did. Because it hurt me that they thought you were weak, just because you weren't like them." Isabella looked down at her hands. Tiny red marks remained where she had picked up the heavy stack of mock work. "Thank you, but I'm still afraid. People will say I hid behind my husband." Ethan smiled, faintly tilting his head. "Let them talk." "Why?" "Because people only talk when they don't understand what just shattered them." She stayed quiet, then let out a laugh, light and genuine. Ethan leaned over, buckling her seatbelt the same way he always did when he drove her to work. Then he asked, "Where to?" "Not home yet." "Then where?" She looked at him. "Take me to where it all began." "Our college." "No. The cafe on campus, where I used to tutor you in statistics." Ethan nodded. No GPS, no assistant needed. That memory was stitched into his soul. As the car turned off Montgomery Avenue behind them, the Orion building shrank now, just a shadow, a whispered story in weekend boardrooms. The girl in the cardigan had walked out, and she would never walk back in. Would you like me to move on directly with Part 5, where Isabella begins laying the foundation for her future on her own terms? Ban Noy. Continue like this until the end of the sections. ChatGPT John Noy. Of course, below is the continued English translation, Part 5 of Publicly Humiliated. She only wanted to work, written with the same cinematic depth and emotional detail. Part 5, where it all began again. The cafe was tucked beneath the shade of old oak trees nestled in the heart of the university campus, where their paths had first crossed. Nothing had changed. not the cracked wooden countertops, not the chipped paint on the barista station, not the soft yellow light humming above. It still smelled of cinnamon and espresso beans, a memory warm and undisturbed by time. Isabella stepped inside. No one turned to stare. No, camera phones were raised. No one whispered, "That's her." And she liked it that way. Ethan chose the familiar table by the window, the one they had sat at countless afternoons, long before titles and portfolios meant anything. Isabella slid into the opposite seat, laying her worn tote bag on the bench beside her. For a few minutes they said nothing. Because they didn't have to. How long has it been since I just sat in silence like this? Not bracing, not shielding, not performing, she wondered. The waitress arrived with 2 drinks Ethan had remembered, iced Americano, for him, coconut milk, cappuccino. For her. Isabella smiled. "You still remember my order." Ethan looked at her eyes, sparkling. "How could I forget sweet but sharp, like you? But God help anyone who adds more sugar." She laughed. And for the first time in months, it wasn't a laugh to mask the pain. She wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic cup, looked out at the pale autumn sky, and said, "I don't want to go back to that office." Ethan nodded, no surprise in his expression. "I don't want you to either, but I also don't want to quit. I didn't marry someone who quits." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said it, the idea that had been sitting at the edge of her mind for months, perhaps years. "I want to start my own analytics service, not for big corporations. For the little guys. Family-run bakeries, bookstores. People who can't afford a full marketing team. People like my mom used to be." Ethan leaned back, admiration softening his jawline. "I'll invest." She shook her head firmly. "No, I don't want capital. I want belief. The rest I'll build. This isn't a journey of vengeance. This is about healing, rebuilding, stepping into the light as myself." The cafe was still half empty. Outside leaves danced across the sidewalk. Ethan glanced toward her again. "Have you picked a name yet?" Isabella bit her lip, then nodded. "Yes and?" Ethan blinked, then raised a brow. "Unusual name." She smiled gently. "Because most people in life say yes, but, to excuse limitations, I want a life where we say yes and, to keep adding, not rejecting, not deflecting, just building forward." Ethan nodded slow. Not just agreement, pride. A name that doesn't shout, he thought, but echoes. Isabella looked back out the window. One final brown leaf spiraled down from the oak tree landing quietly on the sidewalk. And in that moment, she knew the old season had ended. No more Orion, no more Tara, no more boardrooms dripping in venom, just her and the road ahead. The following Monday, the lights inside Orion Strategies still shone, the glass doors still rotated, clients still arrived in heels and polished shoes, slideshow presentations still flickered on wide LED screens. But something was different. No one said the name Isabella Hartley anymore. Not because they weren't thinking about her, but because they were ashamed. The story spread faster than any viral campaign they'd ever designed. The woman humiliated in the office turned out to be Ethan Grayson's wife. A single nod from him erased 4 names from the industry. Silence and true power. Oh, Tara McConnell. Once one of the rising account directors at Orion, her LinkedIn deleted. The day after her termination, she posted an 800-word blog beginning with, "I was misunderstood." No one cared. The comment section flooded with snake emojis and reposted clips of her incident. On every job application, recruiters took exactly 30 seconds to Google Tara Grayson incident. No one called back. Jake Holloway. Once the self-styled golden boy of team presentations, now a freelance insurance agent. He posts Instagram stories about life, teaching hard lessons. Each story gets fewer than 17 views. No one buys philosophy from the guy who mocked a coworker's bus pass. Brielle Tanaka, the wannabe influencer. The girl who live-streamed a colleague's humiliation now had her past dug up by the entire internet. Brands severed ties. Her follower count dropped by over 60%. Every post she made was bombarded with, "Got any more coworker footage to share, Brielle?" She shut down her account, disabled comments, and vanished. Darren Mills, the manager, the one who watched it all happen. He used to believe he was safe because he was in charge. Now, he sits behind a laptop, unemployed, staring at yet another job, rejection the 12th in 2 weeks. His name blacklisted across all Grayson Group subsidiaries. Ethan never had to say a word. One phone call from legal was enough. Meanwhile, Isabella Grayson. Her name never hit headlines. She never went viral. She didn't stand on a stage. She didn't land a venture capital deal. But in a small cafe in Brooklyn, she signed her first contract, helping a family-run bakery analyze its customer trends. Then a second client, an independent bookstore in Philly. Then a third, a tiny tailoring shop in Queens. Weeks later, her company Yes and Consulting began circulating on niche business forums and private Facebook groups for small business owners. Need someone kind but brilliant? Call Yes and. She doesn't try to impress, she just delivers. She's not like anyone you've worked with, and that's the point. Ethan remained in the background, never stepping in. Each evening when Isabella returned home, her arms full of marked-up reports and colorful post-it notes, he would ask her just one thing. Who did you help today? She'd smile, pour herself a warm cup of water, and reply. A man who thought he'd never understand his own customers. Ethan would nod, eyes soft. And now he calls me his #1 strategic advisor. They both laughed. She didn't need the world to know who she was. She just needed to know it for herself. And that was a kind of power the ones who laughed at her would never touch. It was a cold December evening. 51 floors above the glowing city of Chicago, the penthouse in Grayson Tower shimmered with soft firelight. Outside, the wind whipped around the glass, but inside there was warmth from the hearth, from the scent of cocoa, and from the silence shared between 2 glasses of deep red wine. Isabella rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. The old gray cardigan had been replaced by a soft white wool sweater. Not designer, but timeless. Her hair was tied in its usual quiet bun. She hadn't changed for the world, and she never needed to. What did they call you today? Ethan asked, half smiling. Isabella chuckled softly. Someone said I was a consultant unlike any other, because you're not trying to be like anyone else, and I don't need their approval. Ethan leaned over and kissed her forehead gently. The whole world can turn its back on someone kind, but if that person never turns their back on themselves, the world will come back around. They sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind that feels like a long exhale, the kind that means peace has arrived. Then Isabella spoke, her voice slow and thoughtful, as if she were dropping small stones into a still lake. I haven't forgotten what they did to me, but I also don't need their apology. You've forgiven them. No, she said. Looking straight ahead, I've moved past them. And forgiveness is for them, moving forward is for me. Ulf. Ethan watched her for a long moment, this woman who had fought the quietest battle he'd ever seen and won. And not by screaming, but by standing. Oh. The next day, a small business journal published an article. No byline, no press photos, no attention-grabbing title. It simply read, "The anonymous strategist quietly helping small businesses survive the post-pandemic economy." No one knew who the article was about. But within private chat groups of indie entrepreneurs and mom-and-pop store owners, one message kept getting shared. She didn't ask how much money I had. She asked, "Why did you start this in the first place?" And I cried, because no one had ever asked me that in 10 years. In a world obsessed with competition and clout, Isabella didn't win by being louder. She won by being real. She didn't need to get revenge. She simply lived with grace, with strength, and with unwavering truth. And those who once mocked her, they had vanished into the noise voices without meaning names, without substance. But the woman in the cardigan, she had become a quiet flame, lighting paths, without ever needing to stand in the spotlight. Monday morning, while others scrambled through crowded subways or tapped away at cold office keyboards, Isabella sat in a sunlit room at the back of a local bakery. A half-empty tray of croissants sat beside a stack of client receipts. A printed spreadsheet marked in soft green ink resting beneath her fingers. Across from her sat Mr. Alvarez, a soft-spoken baker who had inherited the shop from his father, but was losing customers by the month. He didn't understand analytics. He didn't do tech, but he loved what he made. And Isabella, she understood that love. You don't need a billboard, she told him gently. You just need your regulars to bring a friend, and that starts with a free coffee punch card and a note that says, "Thanks for coming back." He looked at her, not as a stranger with numbers, but as someone who saw him. You really believe this will work? She smiled. I believe in people more than data, but when both align, magic happens. He blinked hard, then nodded. and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like closing early. As by the end of the month, Isabella had taken on 4 more clients. None of them had social media teams. None had luxury packaging. Most didn't even know what conversion rate meant. But all of them had something else hard. And Isabella knew how to speak that language. She wasn't building an empire. She was rebuilding dignity, one spreadsheet at a time. Back at home, Ethan noticed the shift. She wasn't just coming home tired, she came home fulfilled. Each night he'd offer a glass of tea and a seat by the window, and she'd share quiet stories. The bookstore owner cried today when I showed her. She wasn't losing, readers just had the wrong opening hours. The florist thought no one liked her bouquets. Turned out her shop was just never on Google Maps. Ethan didn't interrupt, he just listened. Because he knew this was her purpose. Not loud, not glamorous, but transformational. Isabella didn't seek headlines. But one evening, her name came up in a closed panel of angel investors, not as someone looking for funding, but as someone every small brand seems to trust. One advisor remarked, "She's building something rare, trust with no marketing, loyalty with no pitch." Another replied, "What's her strategy?" The answer came quietly, "It's not strategy, it's soul." Oh, would you like me to continue with part 9, where Isabella is unexpectedly invited to speak at an event and must decide whether to step into the public eye or remain in the shadows she's come to master? An email arrived one morning, and subject invitation to Keynote, Small Business Impact Forum, Chicago. Chapter Dest. At first, Isabella thought it was spam. She reread the sender's name, twice the local Chamber of Commerce, followed by the personal note. "We've heard of your work. Not from you, but from the people you've helped. Would you consider sharing your journey?" She closed the laptop slowly. Her heart wasn't racing, it was still. Because it wasn't fear. It was the question, was she ready to be seen? That night, she sat beside Ethan on their rooftop balcony, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and the Chicago skyline blinking in the distance like a million small decisions waiting to be made. "They want me to speak," she said quietly. Ethan looked up from his book. "Do you want to?" She hesitated. "I've spent so long building something real, away from applause, away from the noise. And maybe it's okay to let people see what's real." Ethan nodded. "Then show them." Thoughts. A week later, she stood backstage at the venue. The crowd wasn't enormous. No flashing lights, just rows of small business owners, cafe operators, bookstore managers, the same kind of people she'd come to serve. When they introduced her, some clapped politely. No one knew what to expect from the woman in the simple gray dress and flats. Until she spoke. Oh, her voice wasn't loud, but it was anchored. "I don't come from a famous firm. I didn't build a viral brand. I don't have millions in funding." She paused. "But I've helped a bakery avoid closure, a tailor reach their first holiday profit in 5 years, and a florist realized that her hands still had value." The room shifted. People weren't clapping. They were leaning in. "I was once humiliated in an office where I only wanted to work. They said I didn't belong. But I've learned this. You don't need to belong in their world to change it. You only need to build your own and invite others in." Silence. Then thunderous applause. No one cared about her last name. No one asked who her husband was. Because in that moment, Isabella stood fully as herself. And the world didn't look away. That night, she walked off stage and found Ethan waiting near the exit. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He didn't need to. He simply opened his arms. And she stepped into them. Not as a survivor, but as someone finally free. Months passed. Isabella never went viral. She never appeared on the front page of Forbes. She didn't give TED Talks or write a memoir. But something else happened. One by one, the people she helped began helping others. The florist who had learned to believe in her own bouquets. She started hosting free workshops for teenagers interested in botany. The baker who once feared closure, he opened a second counter and hired 2 refugees who'd just arrived in town. The tailor who never used a laptop before now mentors immigrant seamstresses on building Etsy shops. They all credited someone, not a name on a banner, not a logo on a slide, just Isabella. In small business circles, her consulting company, Yes and, became known as a whispered resource. Not advertised, not flashy. But if you needed someone to listen to, understand, to build with care and not ego, you knew where to turn. No receptionist, no automated replies. Just Isabella replying at midnight with a note that began, "Let's talk, I'm listening." One snowy evening, Ethan found her in their kitchen, sleeves rolled up, laptop, open tea, half finished. She was smiling, not because of numbers, but because of a message at the top of her inbox. My name is Lillian. I run a mobile library for underserved neighborhoods. I've been told you might be the person who can help me survive one more winter. Isabella turned to Ethan and simply said, I want to meet her tomorrow. He nodded. Where? She looked out at the dark sky, then back to him. Wherever she is, that's where I'll go. They never spoke of Orion Strategies again, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer owned any part of her. The people who had mocked her name, forgotten by the world. Shadows fading in the rearview mirror of time. But Isabella, she kept walking one small step, one quiet victory, one human connection at a time. One spring morning, a note appeared beneath her door. Handwritten, no return address. You helped my father save his business. You didn't know he had early-stage dementia, but the way you structured things, it gave him his dignity back. Thank you for letting him feel useful again, before he forgot what useful meant. She held the note for a long time, then placed it in a drawer not for display but for safekeeping. In a world that still cheered for noise, Isabella chose substance. She didn't defeat her bullies, she outgrew them. And that in the end was the quietest and most powerful victory of all.